Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Top on the agenda for the 2021 UMNO General Assembly, which began on Wednesday, wraps up tomorrow, has been whether or not to expedite the 15th general elections. Bolstered by big wins in the last two state elections in Melaka and Johor, several UMNO top leaders, including the party president Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, have openly called for snap elections. Now, does this reflect the popular will of the party? Let's ask Datuk Ikhwan Salim Sujak, who is the chief of UMNO's Damansara division. Datuk Ikhwan, can I ask you what the mood has been at the UMNO General Assembly, the PAU, and what have you observed about how the speeches have been received by delegates?
Okay, good evening. It was definitely a meeting full of confidence. Having won both states in Melaka and Johor, and I think certainly the mood was very, very buoyant and very, very exciting. However, with that comes the call for early elections. That was quite common in many of the speeches. So that's basically, I'll answer that first. In that sense, it was a very, very exciting time when everybody was in a happy mood, and therefore calling for an immediate, early elections.
Right.
Okay.
So, can I ask you about things that might have divided the party? Because there's been a lot of talk about the aftermath of Johor polls with the Menteri Besar that didn't seem to have the blessings of, the leadership of UMNO taking the helm in a surprising move after the elections. And also, I mean, even the call for to expedite the next general election, has that been divisive among the rank and file? Okay.
In terms of expediting, sometimes I wonder when you say let's do an immediate election. We've got about a year, slightly more than a year to go. Now, it is time to start thinking in any case, in my opinion. However, as I said, we seem to have gone through a good rejuvenation process, and I think that is healthy. But at the same time, I think we have to analyze a little bit more on what has happened given the turnouts and whatnot, or whether it is timely to do it as soon as we can. In other words, as far as I'm concerned, yes, it looks good, but at the same time, we have to make sure with this rejuvenation, it happens across the board, so to speak. We don't want, in my opinion, we should take into account there are some areas of opinion which differ between rural voters as well and urban voters. It would be nice. It would be nice if we can tackle both. And that would be something I think that we should consider given the scenario today.
Yeah. Can I ask you, when you use the word, sorry, just to interrupt you, because you use the word rejuvenation, and I'm quite curious to know what you mean by that, by a rejuvenation in the party. Is the UMNO of 2022 today the same UMNO of 2018 that lost the general elections? And when you say rejuvenation, what exactly do you mean? Because we still see the same people in charge.
I guess the simplest way to describe what I'm saying is the fact that we had younger candidates, we have more women candidates, and this is something I think timely with the situation as it is today. You know, in the past it would normally be the senior people only, but I think recognition, and you see quite clearly in Melaka as well, and in Johor, younger people were brought in, and also women. So that's a major rejuvenation as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's the way to go. You know, we have to address people of all ages. But there is still the factor of rural and urban opinions, which we now have to address.
Could you elaborate on that? What do you mean by the differences between rural and urban UMNO members in terms of their outlook?
Well, I think the urban people are more critical of things that happen almost on a daily or even weekly basis, and that kind of affects their opinion. Whereas I guess more so to the rural, they do think of the same, but in a final analysis, in their opinion, it really is how it affects them more so. As opposed to the urban, where they're looking more so in terms of how it affects the country as a nation as a whole, maybe. Of course, the rural people also care about that, but overall, it is the urban people who are more articulate, if you like, and more detailed in their opinions, and this is what I find amongst my friends here, So that's what I mean.
All right. Okay. Dr. Ikwan, you said a little bit earlier that the topic about whether or not elections should be called as soon as possible seems to be the theme or the topic of conversation in this General Assembly. I'm just wondering whether there's going to be a party motion and USO PAU to agree to call for a general election this year.
Well, I certainly am not aware of any, but I would hope not. Simply because I think the Majlis Tertinggi and the leaders would have first, I think, to settle issues between themselves so that it's clearer picture for us as members. And in terms of Majlis Tertinggi, I think there are some systemic changes which should take place. I mean, for one, as mentioned even in the speech, it is traditional to have the party elections after general elections. I don't see why we should not consider, at least to be considered and to be discussed on whether there could be it could be better the other way around. This would be a major change because having worked for a couple of years as leaders in your own areas, and then finally when it comes to elections before party elections before general elections, then if you have done your work, you would be definitely respected and probably elected by the people who are voting, i.e. the members. You know what I mean?
Dr. Ikwan, I mean, yes, I understand. I want to ask you if there is, I know speeches that we all see on television or YouTube, social media, there's a lot of grandstanding. I think that's typical of all political parties around the world. But in the more reflective moments, when you speak to your fellow members, what are they saying about UMNO's relationship to PAS, for instance, their relationship to Bersatu, in particular, has done well, even though they haven't achieved.
I think many are of the opinion that if we really rejuvenate well and become a party which is liked by all, it is possible for us to be on our own, which we were once. And I think that should be a target for us if we were to take into account the views of everybody and all ages. It is not easy, but I think it's something at this moment possible. And some of the speeches, even the president's speech, was actually quite interesting, giving the direction we're heading and whatnot.
Okay, sure, no problem.
So, yeah. So,
right.
Sorry.
Right, I understand. So we're getting the I guess indication from the top where the top leadership wants to take the party. Sure. I'm quite curious to know about what the delegates are talking about, particularly I guess whether the message from the top or the decisions made at the top are well received by the rank and file. Johor, for instance, and the issue of the last-minute change of the Johor Menteri Besar, has that been a talking point at the General Assembly?
Not to me, from my knowledge, none at all. It is something I think the choice we know it would have to be presented to Tuanku, and Tuanku has the right, of course. But to me and to many of us, he has picked somebody who is younger, who has appeared to have done well with his portfolio, and therefore it's an up-and-coming leader. I didn't hear of anyone really very much against it. It is an opinion by the party, to give one name, but I think finally it will be Tuanku who will have his own reasons to decide on whoever one he decides.
All right. Okay, because we understand it was reported that Johor delegates didn't actually get involved in their speeches. No senior Johor UMNO politician was quoted as saying a massive election victory, speechless. That laced with irony. I want to ask you, though, because the elephant in the room for a lot of Malaysians who are not UMNO members looking in is Najib Razak, former Prime Minister, party leader. Where does he stand? Is he still the future party?
Well, I think, for one, I think many agree his economic policies were certainly difficult to be reckoned with by anybody else. That I think they see clearly. But above all, finally, he is now an advisor. And this is where I think we need a little bit of guidance, because for us to be leading in the next general elections, I think we have to, shall we say, make sure the all levels from the top to the bottom are all at ease with each other and agreeing with who we want to see as potential leaders, So to me, It is an internal matter, but I think if all the 5-6 people can sit down and discuss, because finally it is the rakyat that we have to care for in the country.
Right. And in the last minute that we have left, Datuk Ikwan, if I may, bring our conversation back to the very start, where Sharad actually asked whether there's consensus among the grassroots UMNO delegates who attended as to whether there should be snap polls. And your answer, I appreciate that you said it should be considered. But is there consensus? Is it generally agreed amongst UMNO delegates that there should be elections called as soon as possible?
Well, again, yes, I would say that there appears to be agreement. However, in talking to the many people that I spoke today, they also raised one thing which we discussed: how snappy is the snap? You know what I mean? Because there is still work for us to do. And I think I'm confident the party should be able to work this out, really, for the benefit of the country and the members, And this is what we hope, because we certainly love the rejuvenation that's happening. I think certainly I'm pleased with that, but I think we want to see that taken further,
Datuk Ikwan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Datuk Ikwan Salim Sujak, head of UMNO's Damansara division. We're going to take a quick break, but more on the UMNO General Assembly in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to Consider This.
Hai, saya Mak Dan. Seperti hari-hari biasa, jadual harian saya sangat padat. Jadi saya perlu sentiasa fokus dan aktif dalam kehidupan seharian. Pilihan barangan yang digunakan juga memain peranan yang penting. Setiap pilihan yang dibuat perlulah berkualiti, mudah, selesa dan berpatutan. Barulah nak kerja ataupun lakukan aktiviti senang. Semua ni ada di sini dan tak perlu cara yang lain. Buat apa luar negara kalau ada lokal? Belilah barangan Malaysia. Barang baik, barang kita.
Panasonic Seri FX. Ia membasmi bakteria dengan fungsi Blue AG+ dan menghilangkan semua jenis kotoran degil. Panasonic Seri VR membasuh cucian dengan teknologi basuh dan bilas berkuasa dan gandakan cucian anda dengan Active Foam. Belilah dua-dua.
Satu untuk kita. Sayang bayarkan? Panasonic.
This is my story told by me, not through someone else's eyes.
Are you ready?
This is what a superstar looked like.
She's an empowered woman.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Janet Jackson.
This is the truth. Take it or leave it. Love it or hate it. This is me.
I want to be the one in control.
Hi, thank you so much for staying with Shrad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our look at the UMNO General Assembly, which is currently in session, where the hot topic is whether or not snap elections should be held soon to capitalize on the momentum from the Johor and Malacca elections. Joining us now, we have Dr. Azmi Hassan. He's a senior fellow at Nusantara Academy for Strategic Research. Azmi, now coming off the electoral success of Malacca and Johor, now going into the UMNO General Assembly, I'm just wondering, in your opinion, who is coming to the fore? Whose position has been strengthened by those wins?
Yeah, I guess it's true that, Melissa, that the Johor and also Malacca momentum should be bring forward so that the snap election, general election, to be held as soon as possible. But again, the most important thing is that the opposition, especially Pakatan Harapan, is at the weakest point right now. So right now I think is the right time, as we heard in the General Assembly, called by the President, by the Deputy President, and also most of the delegates. They want the general election to be held as soon as possible, most probably within this year, so that the internal election in UMNO can be held after that.
Azmi, but when you say the right time for whom? The right time for Zaid Hamidi, the right time for Najib Razak, the right time for Ismail Sabri? Specifically, who is it the right time for?
Well, Melissa, I'm going to answer very safe. It's the right time for UMNO. Yes, if you were trying to push me to name individuals, yes, it is the right time for Zaid Hamidi, but it is not the right time for the Prime Minister, which is the Vice President of UMNO. Why I say the right time for the President is that if the general election to be held this year, then the internal polls for UMNO can be held after the general election. So I think, just to answer your specific question, Melissa, yes, it is the right time for the President, but not so the correct time for Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri.
Azmi, we know that in Malacca and Johor, UMNO did well, and says the vote share that they had translated into seats that gave them a healthy majority in those two assemblies. But it's also true that UMNO's votes went down, and that while Pakatan had suffered quite badly in those two polls, Bersatu actually showed that it has a base, a strong base, both in Malacca and Johor. Those numbers did not translate into seats, but do you think UMNO, I mean, if you're putting on an UMNO lens on this, that UMNO should consider very carefully what Bersatu, in partnership with PAS, actually does to the electoral game for them?
Yeah, it's true, Shrad, that with Bersatu and PAS contesting again UMNO, the vote splits between these three parties or between these two entities. It's very true that. But again, Shrad, you look at the Johor popular votes, when you are talking about the number of votes that UMNO gained is double what Perikatan Nasional gained, and also double to what Pakatan Harapan has. So we are practicing majority at each particular constituency. So whoever has the majority, then they will declare the winner, meaning that they have the parliament or the state legislature seat. So in this case, I guess, yes, it is the right call for UMNO. Not that I see UMNO is strong by looking at their popular votes. It is shrinking though, but the shrinkage is much more worse for Perikatan Nasional and also for Pakatan Harapan. So, Sharat, if I'm the president of UMNO, yes, this is the right time to hold the election within this year before the internal polls of UMNO, because the weakest point or the weakest link is on the Pakatan Harapan and also the Perikatan Nasional, Sharat.
Okay. Can I follow up about the internal polls that you mentioned? So party elections, so Zaid Hamidi has called for party elections to be held only after a general election. But we also just heard a little bit earlier from our guest, Datuk Ikhwan Damansara, UMNO Division, who said, well, maybe that's a point to consider. Why not have general elections for party elections first before general elections? I'm just wondering, maybe you can talk us through the trade-offs. Why this push to have general elections before party elections this December?
Well, Melissa, any internal party election just before the general election is a taboo. You just cannot have, whether it's for UMNO or for Bersatu or even for PAS or for the other parties, because there are winners and losers. And the losers, I think, will hold their anger. And this is does not good for the unity of that particular party. I think that's the main reason. But again, Melissa, Datuk Seri President Zaid Hamidi is riding high right now after Melaka and Johor. And also Tok Mat Hassan, the Deputy President. And also Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri is running high. So I think if the election is to be held now, let's say before the general election, I think the current leadership will still hold position. So just to pick up on Datuk Ikhwan said just now, we can consider this. And also I think it's a good consideration because currently Zaid Hamidi is having, I think the grassroots really supports the presidency right now. So I don't see any reason not to hold the internal polls because there are pressure that the polls to be held as soon as possible.
What we've been, over the last year or so been talking about when we talk about UMNO is the deep factionalism within the party. And I wonder if you could comment on an image that's gone viral of the Prime Minister being pushed back and Zaid Hamidi pulling Najib Razak to the fore in a group picture. And this hashtag, PM30, the idea that Ismail Sabri really is becoming a kind of seat warmer for the next, Prime Minister of the country if UMNO and Barisan Nasional win the general election. A lot of talk about that. Zaid has said that he will not, name who the poster boy or the lead will be in the general election. Does all this mean that Ismail Sabri's faction is likely to lose, and will they try to hold on to power?
Yes, that's the perception currently, Sharat. And we look not only in Johor, just right after the big win, but also in Melaka. It's going to be, Datuk Seri Sabri is getting I think, more on the backstage, not the front stage. But again, he's one of the vice president. UMNO has a president and also the deputy president and another two vice president. I think, yes, the perception is that I think Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri is stuck in the middle. He just cannot hold on, trying to thwart any attempt for the early generation, lest he can be accused that he wants to keep his position as a prime minister as long as possible. And he cannot, the demand from certain quarters to hold the election because he has to think the other Malaysians who do not want the general election due to the pandemic. So in this case, yes, Sharat, I think for the Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri, he is in a very, very awkward and difficult position because he's the vice president in UMNO and also the prime minister for Malaysia. I think that's where the awkwardness came about, Sharad.
Can I ask you about Najib Razak? Because he seems to, he was really at the forefront of the campaign trail for Johor. Is Najib a liability or an asset for UMNO?
If you look at Melaka and also Johor, Melissa, he can pull the crowds. He's the center of attraction. So by just looking at that particular factor, yes, he is an asset to UMNO. But again, in my personal opinion, if the general election is to be held tomorrow, I don't think so that Najib will defend his Pekan seat. I don't think so. So for Datuk Seri Najib to claim that Johor landslide win is just because of him, he cannot do that. But Melissa, by looking at Johor and Melaka, I think currently Datuk Seri Najib is an asset. How odd, how weird it is, but that's reality on the ground. He still has the support, Melissa.
Azmi, so this is very interesting because the man is a convicted criminal. And when we talk about, a resurgent UMNO, people will ask, I mean, is this an UMNO of 2018, an UMNO that was racked with allegations of corruption at the highest levels of the party, of, the party selling out the country's interests for, the personal gain of those individuals? Or is this a party that's recognized that what went wrong in 2018 needs to be corrected if it's going to not just win power, but actually do well by the Malaysian public?
Well, Sharad, I hope it's the latter. I think UMNO is trying to change themselves, hopefully, but I think they still need personalities like Datuk Seri Najib. As I mentioned before, he really can pull the crowd. Now, whether the crowd translates to votes, we have no idea. But during campaign, when you are campaigning, there is crowd. The perception is a very positive vibes for UMNO. So, Sharad, I'm really hoping that UMNO is not the UMNO to 2018 or just before that. Now, UMNO is, I think, really want to change. That's, I think, the really hope of the general grassroots of UMNO that, yes, they still support Datuk Seri Najib, how weird it is, how odd it is. But again, he's an asset to UMNO currently, Sharad.
Okay. Well, in the very, very quick 1 minute that we have left, just now we had Datuk Ikhwan say the consideration is how snappy should the snap elections be. What do you think, Azmi? How snappy, considering that the MOU is still in place?
Well, yeah, the MOU is only a few months going to be end. But again, as I said, Melissa and Sharad, if I'm the president of UMNO, now is the right time. How snappy it is, now is the right time, the good time for UMNO. And I reiterated it again because the weakest link, the weakest point of Pakatan Harapan and Perikatan Nasional is at it is right now. So I think the snap election is good for UMNO, but bad for the opposition.
All right, Dr. Azmi Hassan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Dr. Azmi Hassan from Nusantara Academy for Strategic Research, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely weekend. Good night.